Picture this: 3 beautiful princesses, once the pride of their kingdom, now wild-eyed and disheveled, tearing through the streets of ancient Argos. Their royal gowns are in tatters, their hair a tangled mess. They shriek and howl, convinced they've been transformed into cows. This is no ordinary madness. This is divine punishment, a curse from the gods themselves. But what could have provoked such wrath? And what does this ancient tale tell us about the complex relationship between gods and mortals in Greek mythology? Welcome to the tragic story of Anaxagoras madness, a tale of hubris, divine retribution, and the devastating consequences of angering the gods. Our story begins in the sun-drenched kingdom of Argos, ruled by King Proetus. The king was blessed with 3 daughters, Lysippe, Iphinoe, and Iphianassa. These princesses were renowned throughout Greece for their beauty, grace, and royal bearing. But as we'll soon see, even the most blessed can fall victim to the capricious nature of the gods. Now, you might be wondering, who is Anaxagoras? In this context, Anaxagoras isn't a person, but rather another name for King Proetus himself. Some versions of the myth refer to the madness afflicting his daughters as Anaxagoras madness, linking the king's name to the tragic fate that befell his children. As our princesses grew into young women, they became not just beautiful, but prideful. They began to believe their own hype, so to speak. In some versions of the myth, they committed a grave offense against the goddess Hera. They dared to claim that their father's palace was more splendid than Hera's temple. In other tellings, they refused to participate in the worship of Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy. Now, if there's one consistent theme in Greek mythology, it's this: never, ever compare yourself favorably to the gods. It never ends well. The gods of Olympus were a jealous and vengeful lot, quick to anger and devastating in their punishments. And so it was with our unfortunate princesses. Hera, the queen of the gods, was furious at their disrespect. Known for her quick temper and harsh punishments, she decided to teach these mortal girls a lesson they'd never forget. With a wave of her divine hand, she cast a curse of madness upon the 3 sisters. In other versions, it was Dionysus who punished the girls for refusing to join his cult. The god of wine and revelry had a dark side, and those who spurned his worship often found themselves driven to madness. Regardless of which deity cast the curse, the effect was the same. The once poised and graceful princesses were suddenly gripped by an uncontrollable frenzy. They tore off their fine clothes, abandoned their royal duties, and fled the palace, running wild through the streets of Argos. But their madness took a peculiar form. The princesses became convinced they had been transformed into cows. They began to moo and low, pawing at the ground and trying to graze on grass. They fled the city, roaming the countryside, terrifying the local farmers and wreaking havoc wherever they went. Imagine the shock and horror of the people of Argos. These were their princesses, the daughters of their king, now reduced to this pitiful state. The once proud King Proetus was devastated. He watched helplessly as his beloved daughters lost their minds and their humanity. The madness of the princesses didn't just affect them. It spread like a contagion through the women of Argos. Soon, other women began to abandon their homes and families, joining the princesses in their wild rampage across the land. The kingdom was thrown into chaos. Proetus was desperate to find a cure for his daughters. He sent word far and wide, seeking anyone who could break the divine curse. But who could undo the work of the gods? Enter Melampus, a legendary seer and healer. Melampus was known for his ability to understand the language of animals and his skill in purification rituals. When he heard of the plight of the princesses, he saw an opportunity. Melampus approached King Proetus with an offer. He would cure the princesses in exchange for 1/3 of the kingdom. Proetus, in his desperation, refused. The price was too high. But as time passed and the madness worsened, spreading to more and more women of Argos, Proetus became increasingly desperate. When Melampus returned, he had raised his price. Now he demanded 2/3 of the kingdom, 1/3 for himself and 1/3 for his brother. With no other choice, Proetus agreed. Melampus set to work, performing elaborate purification rituals. He used his knowledge of herbs and his mystical abilities to gradually bring the princesses back to sanity. Some versions of the myth say he chased the women with a group of strong young men, eventually driving them into a temple where he performed the healing ritual. Slowly but surely, the princesses regained their senses. They stopped believing they were cows, ceased their wild behavior, and returned to their human selves. The contagion of madness that had spread through the women of Argos was also cured. But the story doesn't end there. The experience had profoundly changed the princesses. They were humbled by their ordeal, no longer the prideful young women who had dared to compare themselves to the gods. They dedicated themselves to the worship of Hera or Dionysus, depending on the version, ensuring they would never again provoke divine wrath. As for Melampus, he became a powerful figure in Argos, ruling over 2/3 of the kingdom alongside Proetus. His descendants would go on to play important roles in other Greek myths. So what can we learn from this ancient tale? First and foremost, it's a stark warning about the dangers of hubris. The Greeks believed that excessive pride or self-confidence would invariably lead to nemesis, divine retribution. This theme appears again and again in Greek mythology, from the tale of Arachne, who boasted she could weave better than Athene, to the story of Niobe, who bragged about having more children than Leto. The myth also highlights the Greeks' complex relationship with their gods. The Olympian deities were not distant, benevolent figures, but active participants in mortal affairs, quick to anger and harsh in their punishments. This story reminds us that in the Greek worldview, mortals were always at the mercy of divine whims. Moreover, the tale explores the thin line between sanity and madness. The Greeks were fascinated by the concept of mania, divine madness, which could be both a curse and a source of inspiration. The madness of the princesses, while a punishment, also connects them to the divine in a twisted way. The story of Anaxagoras madness has inspired artists and writers for centuries. It's been depicted in ancient Greek vase paintings, referenced in classical literature, and reinterpreted by modern authors. The image of the wild, cow-like princesses continues to captivate our imagination, reminding us of the enduring power of these ancient tales. In the end, the myth of Anaxagoras madness is more than just a cautionary tale about respecting the gods. It's a complex exploration of pride, punishment, and redemption. It reminds us of the fragility of the human mind and the transformative power of humility. And perhaps most importantly, it shows us that even in the face of divine punishment, there's always hope for healing and redemption. As we reflect on this ancient story, we might ask ourselves, how do we balance confidence with humility in our own lives? How do we respond when faced with circumstances beyond our control? And what will we be willing to sacrifice to save those we love from suffering? These are the questions that have made Greek mythology endure for thousands of years. They speak to fundamental human experiences and emotions that resonate across time and cultures. The madness of Anaxagoras' daughters might seem far removed from our modern world, but the themes it explores, pride, punishment, desperation, and redemption, are as relevant today as they were in ancient Greece. So the next time you feel tempted to boast about your achievements or compare yourself favorably to others, remember the tale of the princesses of Argos. A little humility might just save you from mooing your way through the countryside.